Have you ever felt like you've met someone who seemed to have been written in the most intimate pages of your soul, as if they carried something that belongs to you, but that you never had? Someone who not only awakens desires, but exposes old wounds, dormant dreams, forgotten versions of who you were before life hardened you. And most disturbing, realizing that being with that person is impossible, not by choice, not for lack of will, but because of something greater. Circumstances, distances, misaligned destinies. Life, for some reason you don't yet understand, doesn't allow that to blossom. And yet, something inside you insists. This connection is real, as if, by some unknown design, that soul had been sewn to yours before time even existed. Carl Jung said that profound encounters are not coincidences. They are internal needs, external manifestations of an unconscious movement that wants to transform you. You don't find them, you call them. And when they appear, they don't come to complete your story. They come to shatter it, to make you look at parts of yourself that were hidden, stifled, perhaps dead. Jung called this archetypal activation, when someone unconsciously embodies the image of something you need to recognize within yourself. And usually, this image comes dressed in love, but not ordinary love. A love that penetrates, that throws you against yourself, that breaks you with tenderness, that tears away layers of you as if removing masks that have long been glued to your face. It's as if the entire universe conspired to bring you across that specific soul, and you feel it. It's no ordinary passion, it's an almost spiritual sensation, a silent recognition, an intimacy that predates language. You look into that person's eyes and see a reflection, but it's not the other person's reflection. It's your own. It's your unlived greatness, your unassumed freedom, your unexpressed love, your still unfinished essence. And you ask yourself, why now? Why does someone like this appear just when everything seems so impossible? As if this person's appearance represented not just a stroke of fate, but a kind of calling, a ray of light within the darkness. But then the paradox arises. The more you connect, the more reality unravels. Time doesn't cooperate. Circumstances sabotage. Logic becomes useless. You try to rationalize, but your mind can't grasp what only the soul understands. And that's when the pain begins, because this person isn't here to stay. They're here to turn you inside out, to set structures ablaze, to shine a light on the shadows, to bring down what is no longer you, to expose what was silenced, to say, without words, wake up. Jung saw this as a call to individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. And this call is rarely sweet. More often than not, it hurts, because it implies death. Death to fantasy, death to the need for control, death to the idea that love must be earned to be real. Jung knew that the unconscious uses symbols and people to force us to wake up, and nothing awakens more than a love that cannot be lived, because it forces you to turn inward, to look at what this love points to decode the symbol behind the presence, and understand, in the deepest silence, that this was not about two bodies meeting, but about a soul awakening. This person you can't have becomes a brutal mirror. Everything you project onto them, the intensity, the beauty, the power to touch you, is what you haven't yet integrated into yourself. It's what you fear. It's what you long to be. It's the forgotten part of your being that finally wants to breathe. And this is devastating, because deep down you don't want them, you want what they activate in you. You want to become that, but the ego resists. It wants to transform that into romance, into history, into permanence. And the unconscious with its ancestral intelligence doesn't allow it, because this isn't about them, it's about you. And that requires surrender. It requires courage. It requires relinquishing the narrative that happiness comes from others. But how can you accept this without losing yourself? How can you accept that something so intense came only to pass? How can you not rebel against fate? How can you remain whole in the face of a love that never materializes? These questions don't have easy answers. And Jung never promised comfort. He promised lucidity. And lucidity often burns more than illusion, because it demands that you grow, that you face your limits, that you delve into the denied aspects of your psyche. That you accept that what seduces you is only the outline of something that exists within you and needs to emerge. That perhaps the true encounter was never with the other, but with what you had hidden from yourself. You start revisiting everything, your choices, your beliefs, your past relationships, and everything seems small, mediocre, because now you know what it's like to feel with your soul. You know what it's like to be truly seen, even if only for a moment. And that changes everything. This person showed you what the world doesn't, and because of that, you can no longer go back to the way you were. You can no longer pretend to be content with less, because you've been exposed to so much, to the great, to the real. And when you touch the truth, the false becomes intolerable. When you taste the depth, the shallow no longer serves. And that's precisely why she can't stay. Because perhaps if she did, you'd settle down again. Maybe you'd stop seeking within what you saw outside. Jung would say that this is the function of the other archetype, to awaken us to our own wholeness. Impossible love is the cruelest and most precise master. It points to what's incomplete and then disappears so you can pursue it. So you can build within yourself what you saw in the other. So you can live not in function of an absence, but in function of the calling that absence awakened. You can try to forget. You can try to distract yourself. You can pretend you don't feel it anymore. But it won't work, because it's not about the person. It's about you. It's about what was activated. It's about the fire that now burns within. And this fire has a mission: to transform, to tear down walls, expand boundaries, purify your identity. You begin to dream differently, to think differently, to feel differently. You begin to die and be reborn, all at the same time. Your emotional biography rewrites itself. Your memories take on new meaning. You begin to walk with more silence and more truth. You begin to realize that what hurts you most isn't her absence. It's the absence of yourself, which has now become unbearable. She reminded you of what you were before you lost yourself, and that is irreversible. You've seen what's possible to feel. You've touched the unnameable. You've tasted what can't be repeated, and now there's no going back. The old you is crumbling, and the new you is yet to be born. You're in between, on the threshold, in the gap between what was and what will be. And that gap is sacred. It's there that rebirth begins. And maybe, just maybe, this person came to give you a push, to show you the abyss, not to throw you, but to remind you that you have wings. Jung knew that the unconscious creates extreme situations to push the ego toward reality, and reality is painful, but it is also liberating, because in reality you find your strength, your shadow, your light, your wholeness, and this wholeness doesn't depend on anyone. It just needs to be awakened, nurtured, and sustained. Maybe she came to break the mirror where you saw yourself as small, to show you that you can love without possessing, feel without understanding, grow without guarantees, and above all, live with your soul exposed, even if the world doesn't understand you. Live in harmony with what you discovered, with the love you felt, with the truth that permeated you. And perhaps one day you'll realize that the greatest gift wasn't having her by your side, but being reminded of who you are. What if all this is not a tragedy, but a preparation? What if this impossible love is just the first gateway to a more authentic life? What if, in truth, what hurt wasn't the loss of her, but the reunion with who you were before you forgot? In the next part, you'll discover that what you most desire in this other is actually what's missing in yourself, and what you've been called to reclaim, not to have it, but to become whole without it. Have you ever wondered why you feel so drawn to someone you can't have? Why does this particular presence among so many others carry such disproportionate emotional weight? It's not just desire. It's not just chemistry. There's something deeper going on. Carl Jung would call it projection, a psychological phenomenon in which unconscious, undeveloped parts of yourself are projected onto another, as if they carry what you can't access within yourself. When we look at someone and feel that they have everything we lack, it's often because we're actually facing a part of ourselves we haven't yet dared to experience, something that has been silenced, something that has been forgotten. Imagine a woman who has spent her life being discreet, shy, and controlled. One day she meets a man who lives boldly, authentically, with intensity and freedom. She feels an immediate connection, as if his soul spoke directly to hers. But life separates them. He lives far away, he has another relationship. He's unattainable. She suffers. His absence hurts as if she's lost a body part. But over time, she realizes that what truly touched her in that man was his freedom, his courage, his expression. And then she understands. It wasn't about him, it was about her. She had projected her own unlived freedom onto him. And realizing this, she begins to rebuild herself. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. That's the point. It's not the other you're missing. It's the part of yourself you haven't yet had the courage to integrate. And the presence of this other served as a lens, a revelation, a mirror. It's as if the soul were saying, "This is who you are ready to become." Hence the intensity, hence the pain of distance, hence the feeling of loss even when there was no possession. Because in a way, what's lost is an image of completeness that seemed for a moment so real. It's like waking from a dream that was more real than the waking state. Jung believed that the human soul possesses a wisdom that precedes the conscious mind, and that the people who appear in our lives with this impact are not random. They are answers. Answers to questions that haven't even been formulated yet. They activate parts of our identity that were dormant, waiting for a trigger, an impulse, an image to remind us. And love, when impossible, carries this power even more strongly. Because there is no distraction, there is no routine, there is no everyday life. There is only the symbolic impact of that presence that remains like a ghost and a guide. And the more it disappears from the physical world, the more it settles within. You can recognize this by observing your own feelings. Why do you feel small around that person? Why does they seem so complete, so alive, so at peace? Why does everything about them enchant you, provoke you, destabilize you? Because they're activating a part of you, a part you've perhaps repressed, maybe since childhood, maybe out of fear, maybe out of trauma, maybe out of loyalty to family, religious or social norms, maybe because you learned too early that certain emotions were dangerous. But now you can't ignore them anymore. This person's presence has made something scream inside you, a desire to expand, to live more truthfully, to stop hiding from yourself. Imagine a young man who grew up in a rigid family, where vulnerability was seen as weakness. He became a closed-off, logical, rational adult. One day he meets a sensitive, intense, deeply emotional woman, and he finds himself shaken, fascinated. He can't stop thinking about her, but he can't give himself over. Something's holding him back, and she, realizing this, pulls away. He suffers, not because of the loss of his wife, but because of the pain of having touched a part of himself that now demands expression. He realizes that what he loved most about her was her freedom to feel, her courage to be vulnerable, her connection with her inner world. She wasn't the answer. She was the mirror. And now he finds himself faced with the task of descending to the layers he never dared explore. These stories are more common than you might think. People who appear like storms and then disappear, leaving a devastated and fertile field. Because that's what they do. They stir, they disconcert, they provoke, and in their absence, they force you to look at yourself, to ask yourself, what exactly did I see in this person? What did they awaken in me? What did I admire? What did I envy? What did I long to be? What part of me did they illuminate that for so long remained forgotten in the shadows? Jung said that what bothers or fascinates you most about another is precisely what is unresolved within you. And this statement, though simple, has the power to transform everything. Because it removes you from the role of victim of absence and places you as an agent of your own awakening. The other is not punishing you. They are teaching you. Your soul has called you, and now it's up to you to listen to what it wants to say. Perhaps the other doesn't even know the impact they've had. Perhaps they've moved on without realizing the transformation they've initiated. But that doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with it now. Projection, when unconscious, can be devastating. You feel dependent on the other person's presence to feel everything. You think that without them nothing makes sense. But as this projection becomes conscious, you begin to gather the parts of yourself that were previously excluded. You begin to realize that what the other person represents also lives within you, that the intensity is within you, that the sensitivity is within you, that the courage, the freedom, the beauty that touched you so deeply are in fact invitations. Invitations from your soul for you to grow. And growing in this sense isn't about becoming someone different. It's about finally being who you've always been. And this growth hurts, because it requires you to leave behind the idealized image of the other. It requires you to stop waiting for them to return, for them to acknowledge it, for them to respond. It requires you to look in the mirror and say, "This is all mine, and now it's my responsibility to live it within myself." It's not easy, but it's the path. The only possible path if you want to stop suffering from absence and start living in presence, your own. Because as long as you wait for someone from outside to return to you what they only came to show you, you'll be denying your own completeness. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about all this is realizing that the other person fulfilled their mission, that they were a guide, that they lit a light, that they pushed you inward, not to hurt you, but to remind you that you are more than you believed, to remind you that within you lie worlds yet to be experienced. And if there's a way to honor this impossible love, it's by becoming what it revealed. It's by living with the intensity it awakened. It's by loving yourself with the depth that previously seemed only possible with them. It's by reclaiming the autonomy of feeling. You don't need to forget. You don't need to deny. You need to integrate. You need to accept that that person was a message, and that the message was, you are ready. Ready to access your wholeness. Ready to live your truth, ready to stop searching outside for what has always been inside, ready to stop projecting and start embodying, ready to stop waiting and start acting, ready to be whole. Because in the end, what you loved most about that person was the reminder of who you can still become. What they awakened in you doesn't disappear with them. It remains, it lives, it grows, and if you have the courage, it blossoms. What if, in fact, the love that seemed impossible was just the key to a part of you that was never allowed to live? In the next part, you'll understand how the pain of this loss can become the most powerful energy for your personal transformation, and how unlived love can give rise to a more authentic, more whole, more alive version of yourself, a version of you that no longer needs mirrors, because you've learned to see yourself from within. The pain of losing someone who was never yours has a silent depth that escapes words. It doesn't scream, it doesn't struggle, it doesn't dissolve into rage or conventional grief. It whispers deep in the chest, as if the air has grown heavier, as if an invisible part of the body has been ripped away. It's not the kind of loss others see. There's no official end, no clear goodbye. There's only emptiness where there was once intensity, and a silence where everything once vibrated. Carl Jung said that nothing that comes from the soul is small, and when something awakens your soul, even for an instant, it leaves marks that never disappear. It doesn't matter if the other person stayed for days, weeks, or even never touched your skin. What matters is what they stirred within you. Because sometimes, a single glance is enough to reorganize your entire inner world. A gesture, a phrase, a presence that shatters your emotional structure like lightning pierces darkness. And that's exactly where the true process begins. You're not just sad, you're breaking. And this is necessary, because what's crumbling within you isn't just your attachment to the other. It's the old version of yourself that can no longer hold on to the truth this encounter revealed. Before, you thought you knew what love was, that you knew what connection was, that you knew who you were. But now, faced with absence that lays everything bare, you're forced to rethink, to rebuild, to shed old certainties. Is this pain really the problem? Or is it a portal, an invitation to cross over into something greater? Many resist this process. They try to return to their old normal. They seek distractions, dive into new relationships, chase anything that erases the memory of what was felt. But what was activated doesn't fade. The soul doesn't unlearn. You can even pretend you've forgotten, but the body remembers. The mind tries to move on, But there's a place inside you that's stuck in that experience, and it won't free itself until you understand why. Jung said that the unconscious is a living field of symbols, and that when something very powerful touches us, we shouldn't try to explain it with logic. We should listen with presence, because that pain you're trying to bury is actually the language of the unconscious saying, "Pay attention. There's something you need to see. There's something you need to integrate. There's something that needs to die so that something truer can be born." But how do you know if you're healing or just fooling yourself? How do you distinguish between the pain that transforms and the pain that only destroys? The answer lies in the direction the pain takes you. If it drags you down, reduces you, distances you from yourself, perhaps it's still resistance. But if, despite the pain, you begin to listen to yourself more, to respect yourself more, to say no to what you once accepted, to dream of other versions of life, to have the courage to be with yourself, then, yes, you are breaking inside, but you are also being reborn. And this rebirth is brutal. It doesn't come with soft light and pretty words. It comes with silence, with sleepless nights, with a desire to disappear, with memories that insist on returning uninvited. But it also comes with something new, a silent strength that grows within you, a kind of emotional maturity you can't learn from books, something only experience can sculpt. You begin to realize that the other person was just the trigger, the spark, that what's happening is a process between you and yourself, that perhaps that person was never here to stay. They came to break, to illuminate, to tear down walls, to expose what was locked away, to show you that you were living below your true self. Have you ever wondered why the pain of this love is so specific, so sharp, so different from other pains? It's because it's not just tied to what was lived, but to what could have been. It carries the weight of what wasn't lived, of unrealized potential, of the version of you that was almost born but is still in labor. And it's this almost that tears you apart, because it leaves you suspended in the middle, between the old and the new, between who you were and who you're trying to be. And that takes courage. Courage not to rush out of the liminal state. Courage not to fill the hole with distractions. Courage to look within and say, "This pain is mine. This transformation is mine. This journey is mine." Because no one can do it for you. No one can feel for you. No one can rebuild your inner world but you. And the most surprising thing is that, little by little, you begin to be grateful, not for the end, but for the impact, for what was revealed, for the memory of what it's like to truly feel, for the clarity of knowing what you no longer want, for the impulse to seek what resonates with your soul. You realize you're no longer the same person, that something was broken, and that break was necessary. But is that enough? Is this pain, no matter how transformative, enough to justify everything you've lost? Maybe the point isn't to justify. Maybe the point is to embrace, to accept that there are pains that didn't come to make sense. They came to shape you, to reshape you from within, to force you to abandon everything that was comfortable but shallow, everything that was safe but soulless. And this reconstruction has no manual. It's intuitive, organic, wild, a silent alchemy between your broken pieces and your new center. Jung would say this is the path of individuation, the path where you abandon the ideal and embrace the real, where you stop seeking the love of others as salvation and begin to discover self-love as revolution, where you understand that not every encounter is meant to last, but every profound encounter is meant to transform. Have you ever noticed how, after certain people, you can never love the same way again? This happens because your reference point has shifted. Your emotional system has been recalibrated. You no longer accept the lukewarm, the predictable, the automatic. You want presence, truth, intensity. And this, although it makes life more demanding, also makes it more vivid. You leave survival mode and enter full existence mode. And this transition is painful, because it requires the death of the character and the birth of the being. You start saying no to what doesn't nourish you. You start moving away from superficial relationships. You start caring more about silence than noise. You start desiring quality over quantity, depth over distraction. And you realize that the wound that once hurt now pulsates like a spring. It's become a direction. It's become a compass. Deep down, was that what you needed? Not reciprocated love, but a break that would bring you back to yourself? Little by little, you'll understand. The pain was just the beginning. The call. What matters is what you do with it now. Whether you let it paralyze you or push you forward. Because pain, when used well, is an instrument of lucidity. It cleanses. It illuminates. It opens space. And maybe one day you'll look back and see that impossible love not as a tragedy, but as a seed, a beginning, a summons. Because it doesn't matter anymore whether he came back or not. What matters is who you've become since he left. What matters is that now you know, you feel, you live with an awakened soul. In the next part, you'll discover that unlived love can, paradoxically, reveal the truest love. The one that arises when you learn to sustain yourself completely. No guarantees, no promises, just presence and truth. What does it mean to love someone you can't have and still feel love? Most people associate love with reciprocity, presence, and continuity. We learn from an early age that love is something shared by two people, that it demands reciprocity, response, and security. But what if this is just a limited version of love? What if the deepest form of love is precisely that, which doesn't depend on possession, permanence, or promises? Carl Jung said that true love begins when we stop projecting onto the other what we wish to be. And this is only possible when you accept that the other is not here to fill your gaps, but to reveal them. Loving without possessing is a challenge because it dismantles the emotional system we've been conditioned to follow. A system that says, if it's not with me, it's not mine. If I can't touch it, it's not real. If I don't receive it in return, it's not worth it. But the truth is that the most transformative love doesn't follow this logic. It's not based on what's received, but on what's revealed. Have you ever noticed how certain loves are more vivid in their absence than in their presence? How some people, even far away, remain present in you in a way that defies reason. This isn't madness. This is a symbolic bond. The human psyche doesn't differentiate between what is concrete and what is emotionally significant. Therefore, when a love ceases to exist on the physical plane, it can continue to exist on a deeper plane, the plane of internal images, memories, and experiences that have been imprinted on you. According to data from the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, more than 60% of people have experienced a crush on someone they've never had a relationship with. This isn't a coincidence. This suggests that unlived love often leaves more intense scars than real relationships. Because it remains idealized, it hasn't been worn down by routine. It hasn't been eroded by everyday conflicts. It remains intact, but at the same time, it provoked a silent revolution within the person who felt it. Imagine a woman who met a man on a short course. They spoke only a few times, but there was an immediate connection. She felt he saw her in a way no one else ever had. But he left. He moved to another city. Life separated them. Years passed and she still dreams of him, not because he was perfect, but because in that brief encounter, she felt something that never happened again. Something that reminded her of who she could be if she had the courage to show herself completely. He became a symbol, a living archetype of her own authenticity. And here's the point. The love that doesn't materialize is often the one that shows us who we are most. Because it's not tied to the demands of a relationship. It doesn't need to be negotiated, defended, or adapted. It simply is. It shows. It reflects. It provokes. And often that's enough. The pain comes when we try to force this kind of love to fit into conventional structures. When we want it to become something safe, controllable, routine. But it wasn't meant to be that way. It was meant to transform you. Have you ever wondered why certain loves end as soon as they become real? Why, after the other is finally available, the intensity fades? This happens because, sometimes, the love wasn't about the other. It was about what they revealed. And once the revelation is fulfilled, the bond dissolves. This doesn't mean it was false. It means it served its purpose. Jung would say that certain encounters are summoned by the unconscious only to provoke an internal change. Once the change occurs, the encounter no longer needs to continue. So what do we do with this love that persists? even without a future? The answer may seem harsh, but it's liberating. You carry it. You honor it. You learn from it. You stop wishing it would transform into something else, and you start asking, what is it trying to show me? What has it activated in me? What has it reminded me I'm capable of feeling? Because true love doesn't want to imprison. It wants to expand. And sometimes the only way to expand is to let go. Many confuse detachment with coldness. They think letting go is the same as forgetting. But letting go, in the context of conscious love, is just the opposite. It's integration. It's accepting that something was real, even if brief. That it was important, even if it didn't last. That it transformed, even if it wasn't lived. And from this acceptance, a new kind of love is born. A love that depends on nothing but its own existence. There's something powerful in knowing you can love someone and still let them go. This requires emotional maturity. It requires trust in life. It requires being willing to live with an open heart, even when it bleeds. Because only then does love cease to be needy and become a path. Only then do you move from being a beggar for affection to being a loving person with presence. Have you ever considered that perhaps this impossible love is the last obstacle between you and your emotional freedom? Freedom isn't about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming whole. It's about realizing that the love you feel needs no justification. It simply exists. And in existing, it reveals you, it shapes you. It calls you to live with more courage, with more sensitivity, with more truth. And this call is for now, for this moment, for this version of you that is tired of waiting and ready to be. In a Columbia University study, researchers found that people who maintain experiences of unrequited love as part of their life narrative have higher levels of emotional self-awareness. This means that remembering an impossible love when done consciously can become a resource for growth. It doesn't have to be a burden. It can be a beacon. You're not being punished for loving someone who didn't choose you. You're being invited to love without expecting anything in return. To love for the sake of loving, because loving like this is remembering that you're alive. And that in itself is a victory. Perhaps life denied you this love because it was too intense to fit into conventional structures. Perhaps it was too big to become everyday, and its role was never to remain. It was to show. Show where you were asleep. Show what was repressed. Show the extent of your own capacity to feel. And this is revolutionary, because it changes everything. It changes how you look at yourself. It changes how you look at others. It changes the type of relationship you accept. It changes the level of presence you demand of yourself. Impossible love, when experienced consciously, raises your internal standard. It teaches you not to accept less. It teaches you not to settle for lukewarm. It teaches you that you deserve something that expands you, not limits you. Maybe this person was just the beginning, the gateway to a new life. Maybe what they awakened in you is a reminder of who you can be when you're connected to what's true. And maybe, just maybe, this unrequited love is the truest you've ever experienced, because it depends on nothing but your own surrender, on your own courage to continue loving without holding back. In the next part, you will discover that love that does not materialize can open the necessary space for the most important love of all to be born. The love you give yourself when you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself every day with maturity, wholeness, and freedom. There comes a time when you stop asking why things didn't work out and start asking who you've become after all this. The pain no longer throbs like it used to. The person's name no longer triggers your heartbeat, but there's still something, a different silence, a kind of emotional maturity you didn't have before. Something in you has changed. Something has awakened, and now, even without realizing it, you begin to act on this change. It's not a sudden shift. It's a transformation that slowly infiltrates your habits, your desires, your way of seeing the world. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation is like removing, one by one, the masks we wear to survive. Social masks, emotional masks, masks that help us belong, but distance us from ourselves. And often, the person who rips off these masks is someone who doesn't even stay. Someone who arrives like a whirlwind and then departs, leaving the foundations shaken and the soul raw. This person didn't necessarily intend to cause this change. They were simply the trigger the unconscious chose to open the soul, like a wound that, once opened, can never be ignored. When you meet someone who impacts you this way, it's not just a meeting, it's a rupture with everything that was automatic within you. The way you related, the way you hid, the way you loved, all of it collapses. And no matter how hard you try to return to who you were, something inside you no longer allows it. Because now you've seen, you've felt, you've recognized yourself through the other person. You've understood without words that you were emotionally asleep. And when you wake up to the truth, the old comfort becomes a prison. And there's no going back after recognition. There's no unseeing what's been seen. There's no going back into the emotional clothes you wore before. You begin to realize that what enchanted you most about the other person wasn't just theirs. It was yours. That spontaneity, that depth, that intensity that seemed so rare, it was a projection of the part of you that had been locked away. You weren't just admiring the other person. You were rediscovering yourself. And now, even if unconsciously, you feel the need to do something about it. Because the price of ignoring it would be too high. It would be like returning to the surface after breathing the depths of the ocean. How many times have you tried to fit into lukewarm stories after that? How many times have you tried to find that same vibe in others? And how many times have you felt like you were betraying yourself by trying to live something lesser just to avoid being alone? This is the silent pain of the awakened. Nothing less will do, not out of arrogance, but out of integrity. Because once you feel what real intensity is, any attempt at half-presence feels like falsehood. You recognize the difference between warmth and presence, between attention and connection, between companionship and communion. You begin to make different choices. You begin to realize that presence is worth more than appearances, that the silence of someone genuine is more valuable than 1,000 words from someone who doesn't give themselves. You begin to seek meaningful encounters, not distractions with expiration dates. You begin to want to live more truthfully, even if it means walking alone for a while. And this time of solitude, once feared, becomes fertile ground, because it is there, in the void left by the other, that you plant the seeds of your own presence. Jung believed that everything that isn't brought to consciousness returns as fate. In other words, if you don't integrate what that encounter revealed about you, life will continue to place you in the same situations, the same pain, the same frustrations, not as punishment, but as an invitation, an insistent invitation for you to stop running from yourself. And the more you resist, the more intense the encounters, the shocks, the ruptures become, until you bow before the truth. Change isn't out there, it's within, and this process isn't linear. You'll experience setbacks. You'll miss someone. You'll find yourself fantasizing about what it could have been like, but you'll also feel relief. Because little by little, your attachment to the idea of the other begins to dissolve, and in its place, something more solid emerges. A commitment to who you're becoming. You no longer want just love. You want a reflection, a mirror that doesn't deceive you, but reminds you of yourself. And when that happens, love stops being an escape and becomes a mirror. It stops being desire and becomes a starting point. And it starts with small decisions. You say no to relationships that lack depth. You stop adapting to what doesn't nourish you. You listen to yourself more. You respect yourself more. You start adjusting your routine, your time, your energy to what truly resonates. You let go of the rush to please, the urgency to be chosen. And you start asking yourself, what is true for me right now? This question, when asked sincerely, has the power to change your story. Think of someone who, when touched by a relationship like this, completely changes their way of life. They start dressing differently, eating more consciously, moving to a new city, reevaluating friendships, not because you're trying to be someone new, but because you're finally allowing yourself to be who you've always been. The other person served as a catalyst, but the movement is now internal. They understand that they no longer need to chase after what reminds them of themselves, because they've already learned to remember themselves. This is the most important point. The other person activated it, but its continuity depends on you. You no longer need that presence to continue growing. The memory, the impact, the emotion, all of it is already within you. It's already part of your story. What once seemed like a wound is now a foundation. You've rebuilt your world on top of the pain. And because of that, everything that comes after will be truer. Not because it will be perfect, but because it will be aligned with who you've become. Have you ever noticed how, after you rebuild yourself, the people around you change too? As if your inner self begins to attract new connections, new experiences, new levels of surrender. This happens because the unconscious recognizes congruence. When you live from your truth, everything around you begins to align. Relationships take on a new texture. Conversations deepen. Bonds become less about filling and more about sharing. You stop attracting those who want to shape you and start attracting those who want to know you. You stop chasing answers and start walking with better questions. You stop searching for someone to save you and start wanting someone with whom you can share your salvation. You exchange neediness for partnership, urgency for construction, illusion for reality. And this change, however subtle, is revolutionary because it marks the end of the external search and the beginning of the internal encounter. And that doesn't mean the pain has completely disappeared. It means it's found a place, that it's been integrated, that it now works for you, that it's transformed into clarity, into judgment, into strength. Because nothing teaches you more about yourself than loving someone you can't have and still coming out of it whole. Whole but different. Whole but more aware. Whole but more whole than you've ever been before. It's at that moment that you understand. That encounter was never about the other person. It was about what the other person awakened. It was about the part of you that was forgotten, that was stifled, that now wants to live, that demands to live. And truly living is no longer an option. It's a necessity, a serene urgency, a revolution that begins when you stop waiting to be saved and decide, finally, to inhabit yourself completely. In the next part, you will discover that definitive absence no longer needs to be experienced as loss, but as the beginning of a deep and silent presence. The presence of yourself whole, mature, awakened. The end arrives, but not the end you fear. The end is a beginning. The end is liberation. Absence no longer hurts as it once did. It has become part of your silence, part of your very fabric. You haven't forgotten. You haven't stopped feeling. But what was once loss is now presence. Not of the other, but of yourself. A more complete presence, more solid, more real. And in recognizing this, you find yourself facing something even greater. Life demanding passage, wanting you to finally take your place. Carl Jung said that the soul has its own path. It doesn't seek what's easy. It seeks what's necessary. And it was necessary for you to love someone who didn't stay. It was necessary for absence to pass through you like a wind that moves the deepest leaves of your being. It was necessary for you to lose the other to find yourself. Now finally you understand. That story was never about loving and having. It was about loving and transforming. And that, although it hurt, was an act of profound love of life itself for you. Definitive absence is no longer experienced as an open wound. It is matured as a sacred mark, like a silent reminder that you are no longer asleep, that your soul has been touched and has not returned to its point of origin. And that is enough. Because now you live from a different place, a more authentic place, calmer, more aligned with who you are, not with who they expected you to be. This silent alignment begins to reflect in everything, in your words, in your gestures, in the choices that once seemed small, but now carry weight and awareness. You can spend the rest of your life waiting for someone to bring you what this person awakened. Or you can decide now, everything they showed you, you can be, you can embody, you can live. And you no longer need the other person to be present for you to access this power. The key is now with you, and it opens doors you didn't even know existed. Inner doors, abandoned corridors of the soul, lights that only turn on with your permission. The love you felt wasn't lost. It simply changed direction. It left its idealization and descended into your body, into your routine, into your daily choices, into the way you care for yourself. how you relate to others, how you handle time, silence, and touch. Love has now become practice, consciousness, a path. And this path, though lonely at times, is the most authentic you've ever traveled. But how do you turn this awareness into concrete action? How do you make what you've learned from pain a part of your daily life, not just a nice memory or emotional speech? The path lies in 3 essential steps: integration, commitment, and expansion. Integration is embracing everything you've experienced without denying any part. It's looking at the experience honestly and saying, "This happened to me, this touched me, this changed me, and I accept it." Not as a victim, not as a martyr, but as someone chosen to go through this story and become greater than it. Integration is accepting impossible love as part of your emotional biography, without needing to erase it, without needing to nurture it. Simply allowing it to be what it is: a milestone, an origin, a curve in the road. It's recognizing that even the most painful chapters of your book were written with purpose. Committing means acting from this new version of yourself. It means making more aligned choices. It means saying no to what repeats old patterns. It means being honest with yourself, even when no one is looking. It means stopping distracting yourself with shallow relationships, just to avoid facing the void. It means learning to be with yourself as if you were with someone precious, because you are. It means treating yourself the way you treat someone you love. It means stopping seeking outside what already pulses within. And above all, it means never abandoning yourself again for anyone, not out of fear or need. And expanding means taking this new way of loving to the world, not in the sense of immediately seeking another love, but of beginning to live with more presence, more empathy, more truth. It means transforming the love you've felt into presence in small gestures, in paying closer attention to those who cross your path, in being patient with your processes, in listening to your emotions. It's becoming the kind of person you long to find. It's being the very encounter you sought, and in doing so, inspiring others to do the same. You don't have to do it all at once. It can start with something simple, a change in routine, a new habit, some guilt-free time for yourself, a clear boundary in a stressful relationship, a moment of pause in the middle of the day to take a deep breath and remember, I am here. I belong to myself. Every small action, done consciously, is a step on the path to real transformation. And each step generates a new echo within and outside of you. Reality begins to react to your presence. And if at any point you feel like you're back where you started, that the longing is strong, that the pain is returning, remember, this too is part of the process. There is no healing without cycles. There is no growth without relapses. But each time you return to yourself, you return a little more whole, a little wiser, a little more your own. The spiral of consciousness doesn't recede, it deepens. Impossible love was the spark, but the fire is now yours, and you can use it to burn what no longer serves, to illuminate what was hidden, to warm the parts of you that were frozen. You are not the same anymore, and you shouldn't be, because pain only makes sense when it becomes direction, when it transforms into art, into choice, into clarity. So here's the practical plan, summarized in actions you can start taking today. 1. Create a daily space for inner listening, 10 minutes a day, in silence, just feeling what's alive within you. If you like, write down what emerges later. 2. Write an unsent letter to the person who awakened you, not to deliver it, but to release what was stuck. 3. Make a list of the qualities you most admired in the other person and ask yourself, where does this live in me? How can I cultivate this? 4. Practice one act of self-love each day, something concrete, small, but symbolic. It could be a meal cooked with love, a long bath, or a sincere compliment to yourself. 5. Choose a relationship in your life where you're still acting out of neediness and set a clear boundary, even if it causes discomfort. 6. Every week reflect, does this version of me that I am being today resemble who I really am? 7. Share this process with someone you trust. Sometimes saying what we feel out loud is the first step to integration. 8. Reread passages that resonated with you. Return to texts that touched your soul. Repetition is a way to deepen your understanding. 9. If possible, create a physical symbol of your rebirth. A stone, a necklace, a saved letter. Something that reminds you of who you are becoming. 10. And whenever you can, ask yourself, what would love do now? These steps are simple, yet profound. They have the power to shift your emotional foundation if repeated consistently. Transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens in layers, in cycles, in ever deeper returns to yourself. And that's what you deserve, to return to yourself. With lightness, with courage, with love, with presence, with choice. If you've made it this far, know that it already says a lot about you. Not everyone has the courage to look within so deeply. Not everyone has the willingness to transform pain into awareness. But you do. And that's why you've already started. There's no turning back, only deepening. If this content touched you in any way, I invite you to do 3 things now. Like this video so it reaches more people who also need to hear it. Subscribe to the Deep Psyche channel to continue receiving content that helps you understand your emotional journey in an honest, profound, and transformative way. And leave your comment below. You can leave it anonymously if you prefer. Share your experience, your pain, your doubts, your discoveries. This isn't just a video, it's a listening space, and you're a part of it. Absence was the beginning. Now you are the presence. And that changes everything.